Okay, welcome to Chocolate Sunday Part 2. Uh, this is addressing the subject of inheritances. My name's Angie, and I live in Ireland. Okay, where to start? Inheritances are a huge thing in Ireland. There's plays written about it, there's films written about it, people shoot each other over it. There's people emigrate and never come home because of inheritance upsets. So, having worked through issues I had myself about my family, I just want to share it. So, my dad is the eldest son of a family of 16, born in Dungarvan in Waterford, raised in a two-bedroom cottage, not wealthy, wealthy in their history, but not wealthy in my dad's generation. And his dream was to emigrate, earn enough money to come home to Ireland and buy a farm. And he did that. He emigrated at 19 and came back at 53 with enough to buy a 65-acre small holding, really. But along the way, there have been some real upsets. And the first one that I can speak of, with experience is we had a family restaurant from I was about 12. And it was a great success. This was in Bradford-on-Avon in Wiltshire. My dad bought a derelict building and a listed building, converted it into a 150-seater restaurant, and 16 staff working there, but most of whom, well, not most, but like mum, dad, Fiona, one of my sisters, myself, and probably my two younger sisters as well, all worked hard, but it was a lot of fun. I worked about 25 hours a week in it, as well as going to school, but that's okay, it was fun. Out of the proceeds of that, and having bought an acre in Kilgobnet, my dad bought his parents' house for them. His parents had moved out of the railway cottage that they raised the children in, and they'd been given a house, a council house in Abbeyside, beside the sea in Dungarvan, beautiful. And to make my grandparents feel secure, my dad bought their house for them. For them to live in for their lifetime, and then the understanding was it would then be, belong to us kids. But what happened was my parents went through a rough patch and separated for 11 months, and my dad thought mum was going to come after him with solicitors for half of everything, which is not unreasonable. But what he did was he talked to his siblings and said, quick, somebody needs to take the house off my hands so Dorothy can't get hold of it. And kind of panic mongering. And so one sister, Auntie Nora, I don't mind being open about this because it's fact, what are you going to do, sue me? Auntie Nora said she would buy it for the cost that Daddy had paid years before, but she didn't have the money. So he said, oh, no problem, I'll lend you the money. I think Auntie Nora raised 1,500 and Daddy lent her the rest, which was peanuts back then. It was £4,000. And he transferred the deeds. And Auntie Nora went and got the house valued, immediately, having bought it for 4,000, most of which was loaned to her by my dad. It was valued at that time at 70,000. After the 11-month separation, my mum and dad reconciled. And one of the first things my mum asked Dad to do was to correct that injustice and go to his sister and say, look, I shouldn't have offloaded the house and my motives were wrong. Could you please sign it back? But predictably, perhaps she wouldn't. So it caused a lot of upset in the family, and when my grandparents were both dead, well, my grandfather was dead at that time anyway, but when my grandmate had died, and then that Auntie Nora died, her daughter inherited the house and sold it for 200 grand, and gave 5 grand to each of the living uncles and aunties. But it was kind of a thorn in the side. It was not a nice thing that happened, and it left a very sour taste. I had approached Auntie Nora several times when she was alive, saying, you know, would you please do the right thing? It's not honourable what happened, and it's not right. And you must have known at the time that, you know, to buy a house valued at 70,000 for 1,500 plus whatever Dad supposedly loaned you is not right. And to buy it on the premise that quick, I've got to offload it in case Dorothy gets her hands on it, it just wasn't right, and it caused a lot of upset. I think that was the beginning of when the family started to exclude me from weddings and reunions, because nobody wanted to address the issue. And Auntie Nora said she bought it in good faith and it was tough luck. So that was the first situation in our family history that was unpleasant. Then, with the 65-acre farm that my dad bought in Oldcastle, we were raised with with kind of the Irish work ethic, and pretty much were working, you know, with hindsight, it was child labour, but from the age of 8 probably onwards, we were working, helping our parents deliver easy fit cover leaflets, or helping our parents clean offices, or working in the restaurant. You know, we all had to work. That was just the culture. And when we used to kind of like kick up a little bit about the volume of work we had to do, Dad had a favourite saying back in Bradford, even when we were kids, and I would say, I don't want to work Saturday night in the restaurant, Dad, all my friends are going to a party, or I want to get a job in the mushroom quarry that pays 3 times what you're giving me, or you know, I want a holiday, I want a weekend off, whatever it was. He would always say, oh, don't worry, it'll all be years when I'm gone. It's a family business. The family has to pull together. It'll all be years when I'm gone. So Dad came home, bought the 65-acre farm. At that stage, I was at university, and my 2 older sisters were living their lives in England. We'd been raised in England, so pretty much it was a case of Dad returning to Ireland with 2 of his 5 daughters. And for a while, my 2 younger sisters helped with the farm, helped try to establish it, and lived in very basic conditions while it was upgraded. My mum got a couple of inheritances, and she put, you know, quite a lot of money into making it habitable, modernised. Dad sold off a 16-acre field so that he could build an extension onto the farm, and he wrote letters to all the 3 children left behind in England saying things like, you know, there's always an acre each for you if any of you want to build, and, you know, it's my dream come true to have somewhere where all the grandchildren can run around with horses and dogs and chickens and whatever. So it's nice for him that he had his dream come true. So my 2 younger sisters worked together on the farm for a few years, and the older 3 of us used to come home 2-3 times a year. We absolutely loved it, passionately loved it. Then both my younger sisters married locally in Oldcastle, and the second youngest divorced. And although she'd built a house on the land, my dad gave her an acre for a wedding present, and she built a bungalow, but between difficulties, 2 sisters running the farm together, now they both married, and then the fact that she divorced, she decided to call it quits and go back to England. So then, up until then, for about a year or something before that, my parents had let my baby sister actually move in and live in the farm with them. My baby sister with her husband, with, I think, their first child was born, possibly both children were born at that time, and they were all living with my parents. and that didn't work either. So my dad decided, okay, something had to give. Either he was going to sell the farm or something, but it wasn't working living with my baby sister and her family all under the same roof. Dad has a saying that you can never put two women in a kitchen. Two women can never share a kitchen. So I was living in Kilnalek. I'd come back to Ireland by then. I just always dreamed about getting back home, as I called it. And I was married with 3 children, moved back to Ireland, rented a beautiful place in Kilnalek, and Dad came over to see me in Kilnalek and said, "It's not working. Your mother and your sister, sharing the farm. So I'm thinking of giving it to Anne-Marie. And to make up for doing that, I'll give you 4 acres. Will that be okay?" And up until then, we'd all been raised that everything was everybody's, and everything would be divided equally when my parents died. And I never had any desire to be a farmer. I loved the horses and the dogs and everything, but that's not my gifting. That wasn't my life's ambition. So I kind of said to Dad, well, it's not very fair, but of course I'm not going to turn down 4 acres, with the possibility of planning permission. So that was agreed. And then apparently he went to my other sister, the one that had helped set the farm up, the second youngest one, and said, "I'm thinking of giving Anne-Marie the farm. If I tell her to give you the price of your bungalow," I'm not sure whether they asked or Sharon offered, but either way, the deal apparently was that Mum and Dad could live in Sharon's bungalow because she'd returned to England. Phil and Anne-Marie would pay the market value or close to the market value for the bungalow in return for getting the farm signed over to them. The rest of our sisters understood that the bungalow, Sharon had sold it. She'd sold the bungalow, and that was what Anne-Marie and Phil had bought for Mum and Dad in order to take over their home, our home. Years later, there was a different version where Sharon said no. I offered Dad and Mum to live in my bungalow, and Dad said, "Well, we'll tell Phil and Anne-Marie they're buying it for us. That way you'll get a few quid and then it'll still be yours when we die." Which was horrible. I hate secret deals. I wish families could actually just discuss what's going to happen so that you don't rip apart families after you're gone. It's just a horrible, horrible legacy to leave. So as things stand, Anne-Marie has the farm, and 16 acres of it was signed over to her firstborn son by my dad. Before he sold her the remains of the farm, he had signed over 16 acres to her firstborn son because he'd had 5 daughters and no sons. And then, as it turns out, my parents have lived in the bungalow for which we thought Sharon had been paid market value. They've lived in it for 13, 14 years, but now Sharon's saying no, it's still hers, and that there's 70 grand or whatever that she was paid market value at the time, or just below. She's saying no, that's the equivalent of rent. So, and then there's 4 acres left, 3 or 4 acres, I'm not sure. And then, just to regress, the 4 acres that my dad offered me as a sweetener to go along with this new deal of giving the farm to one daughter, I was too embarrassed to get him to put it in writing. I thought it was a bit unsavoury to have your parents commit to writing something they promise you. I just didn't think it was nice. So although a few people said to me, you really should have them transfer the land over to you, I just thought, no, well, I trust them. Their word is good enough. My husband, he's my ex-husband now, but we fenced off the 4 acres, post and rail. I applied for planning permission, I got it. I had to appeal. It's very hard to get planning permission in rural Ireland, but I had to appeal, and I did a brilliant appeal based on Charlie Haughey having built on some island that he had no connections with, because the grounds that my planning permission application were turned down on was that I didn't have enough connection to Cross-Drum. So I said, well, how come the Taoiseach got planning permission on an island that he had no connection to whatsoever?